Turning now to the man who is at the center of the Syrian crisis, Bashar al Assad, who rose to power in 2000, succeeding his father, who had ruled Syria with an iron grip for 30 years. One of the few Westerners who's well acquainted with Assad says when he first took over, expectations ran high that he would bring about some positive reforms in his country. Dr. David Lesh is shedding new light now on the ophthalmologist turned tyrant and is here to share his insights about how Assad's regime has failed Syria with a new book called The Fall of the House of Assad. Dr. Lesh, who is a professor of Middle East history at Trinity University in San Antonio, is joining us now. Welcome. Great to have you here today.
Good to be here with a Trinity alum.
Yes, indeed. You are one of the few people in the West who has had a chance to spend significant time with Assad when you first met him back in 2004, when you were interviewing him for a book back then. Give us more of a profile of Assad at that time.
Well, he was someone who was unassuming, he was unpretentious, he was always very polite and punctual, and that's the profile that emerged when he came to power in 2000. And I think it was a profile that emerged in the West that created very, very high expectations. When I first met with him, I remember telling him, Mr. President, you know, one of the biggest mistakes you made upon coming to office in 2000 was you made it be known that you like Phil Collins music, and the British rocker. And I said that because it fed into this emerging profile that he was a pro-Western, modernizing reformer, simply because he was a licensed ophthalmologist, because he studied ophthalmology 18 months in London, because he liked Western rock music, because he liked the technological toys of the West. But I think, you know, these expectations were too high because they failed to see that what had a greater impact on his worldview and his life was that he was a son of the Arab-Israeli conflict. He was a child of the superpower Cold War. He was a child of the civil war in Lebanon that affected Syria so much. And most importantly, he was a child of his father, Bashar al Assad. And so I think people expected way too much of him, particularly in a system that it was dilapidated and inert and stagnant that he inherited. It's a very entrenched system. And I think he tried to make change in the beginning, but the system fought back, and it won in the end.
Well, at that time, of course, you had no clue that he would be capable of heinous acts or even resort to killing his own people with a chemical attack, because you point out about those expectations that were running high, that people really believed in his own country that he would be a different kind of leader, a leader that would be far different than his father was.
Yeah, exactly. And because he had the atypical background of your usual Middle East authoritarian leader. And so expectations were very high inside and outside of the country. But I think, you know, what happened over the course of time is that he grew very comfortable with power. And that's not a bad thing, but in an authoritarian system, that means you become much more comfortable being an authoritarian leader. And all that entails with regard to the trappings of power, all of that entails with regard to the system that keeps you in power and maintains you in power. And I also think he developed a strong sense of triumphalism and destiny, surrounded by, you know, first sycophants who praise him on a daily basis, and it's only human nature to start to believe that sort of rhetoric over the course of time, but also because he faced down, you know, several very, very severe challenges. First, his opposition to the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, and most particularly the accusations in 2005 that Syria was behind the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, and the tremendous pressure that the West and its regional allies brought on Syria, and that he emerged from this pretty well. He, you know, started to break out of his isolation. In fact, just a few months before the uprising began in March 2011, in December 2010, he was being celebrated by the Parisian elite on a trip to France. So everything seemed to be going well, and that's one of the saddest things from my point of view, is that he mortgaged all this away by making an unfortunate decision to crack down harshly on the uprising.
And really quickly, we were just showing photos of his wife there with her husband, the president. What impact has this had on his family in Syria?
Well, I can only imagine. I mean, so far, Bashar al Assad has stood by her man, so to speak. The family was very, very important, and I imagine still is, to Bashar al Assad. And that's one of the things he tried to maintain a normal lifestyle, which is how he was brought up by his parents. But that's all been flittered away. Obviously, you cannot have a normal life in current conditions.
Certainly. Well, it's great to have you here sharing your insights about someone so few of us really know about, and the fact that you had a chance to spend some time with him offers us some fascinating insights. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.